Let it never be said that the Bible doesn't have very funny moments. Oh, Paul. Such a mild-mannered, such an easygoing guy. Never had very strong opinions. Nothing ever got under his skin. So humble.
Humble never.
Said no one ever. This story is fascinating to me because Paul gets everyone in a bunch of trouble because he's annoyed. Ever been there? Ever had someone do that to you? Yeah. Guilty on both counts. But this is a very fascinating story. So let me kind of set up the context here. I often thought growing up that the reason why these two slave owners seized Paul and Silas was because they took their money, their meal ticket away. The reality is, thanks to my history nerd fiance, in Rome, if divination was a major part of the cult and the religions of the time, and again, religion and politics were one and the same. There was no separation. So for Paul to exorcise a Roman pagan divination spirit was blasphemy. And blasphemy was a crime. So, naturally, if you let yourself get annoyed by a taunter long enough and commit an illegal act that also affects the economy, which divination does, tends to get you in trouble. Now, I also thought growing up that this girl was going behind them in a reverential tone. These men are the slaves of the Most High God, offering you salvation. Then I thought about it. Somehow I don't think Paul would be upset if someone followed him around for days, heralding the good news of what they were offering. After all, what was Paul out there doing in the rest of the Roman Empire?
Heralding the good news.
Precisely. So Paul, what gives, man? What are you doing? Well, my hunch is in true childhood fashion, which I sometimes love and sometimes hate. The Spirit was probably speaking through her going, these are the slaves of the Most High God. They're proclaiming the way of salvation. In true Adam Sandler voice. Because apparently that's the voice that she had in my mind. So imagine if someone is mocking you and taunting you for days, not just one off, for days, and you can't get rid of them. They won't shut up. Would you be annoyed?
Yes.
Me too. Me too. Like the street preacher that I had an interesting interaction with on Friday night and realizing there was no way of getting him to stop yelling hateful speech. And so we eventually left. But that's another story. So Paul gets sick of this divination spirit taunting him through this girl. Cast the spirit out. Now, you would think that being able to cast out a spirit in the name of Jesus would lend some credibility to the power that he has. And that maybe that would be a way of saying, okay, you got rid of my meal ticket with this girl, but maybe I can latch on with you guys and have power. No. Now, a sensible human being on the up and up would go and say, hey guys, what are you doing? You just took my meal ticket away. You owe me something. Is that what they do? No. They grab them, they seize them, throw them in front of the magistrate, and hurl not only legitimate accusations they have broken Roman law by casting out this divination spirit, but also making up a bunch of other things about them and using the slander. These are Jews that are asking us to do things that are unlawful in Roman law. Now, magistrates, being fine, upstanding upholders and keepers of the law, gave them a fair trial and went through their due process, right? No. Not only did they flog them without a proper trial, they allowed all these people in the community to attack them as well. Not exactly upright. So, because of Paul's irritation at being taunted by this divination spirit, they are now being beaten and flogged and persecuted and unjustly thrown in prison. And the jailer is told, keep them secure. Do not let them go. And the jailer's like, right on. Innermost cell, lock them up, make sure everything's good. So what do when they get into prison? Do they yell and hurl insults at the Roman leadership in Macedonia? Do they sit quietly and forlornly and depressed and hopeless? No. Yes, they pray and sing. Now, if I had just been beaten severely and stripped naked in front of the whole town, I don't think I would be like, yay, let's sing hymns to God. There's probably some less than savory songs that would come out of my mouth that are my means of catharting my anger when it happens so that I can go out in the world and do good. And what happens? Violent earthquake. Gotcha. Sorry. So violent that it undermines the foundations. Now, the reason why the jailer, when he woke up, wanted to commit suicide was because it was better to commit suicide if you let your jailies escape than to try to live on. You would be seen as a coward.
Or torture.
Or torture, yes. But the nice thing is, Paul's like, hold on, nope, don't do it. We're still here. We're still here. We are not going to throw you under the bus. Now, a normal person in this situation would be hightailing it out of that jail. And they would be right to do so. But Paul stays in the conversation, gives room to the jailer, gives dignity to the jailer that was not given to him and Silas. And as a result, this jailer goes from dismissing them outright to going, what do I need to do to be part of this? And he and his whole household become members of the Jesus movement. What an incredible story. Nice. Wait. What's not being focused on here? Whose voice is eerily silent, who is an absolutely pivotal part of this message? The slave girl. She never says one word of her own volition, of her own authority in the entire story that she is the pivotal moment that creates. The only thing that she says is through the voice of the divination spirit, taunting Paul and Silas, calling them slaves of the Most High God, bringing away of salvation. Did the slavers care about her? No, she was a meal ticket. What will likely happen to the slave girl now that she no longer is able to be that meal ticket for those slavers? We don't know. Cast aside. Did the slavers, did the townspeople, did the magistrates, did even Paul and Silas really think about the consequences of what they did to this girl? Ouch. Those voices that we don't pay attention to, especially the voices of those who are historically and continually silenced for the voices of those who have their own power and their own issues, are voices that are crucial to listen to. The slavers were more interested in making money off of the legal enslavement of another human being than they were of the dignity of that young girl. Paul was more annoyed by the divination spirit than he was worried about the girl's well-being. But was it legal to call them up in front of the magistrates? Yes, absolutely. Was it legal to prosecute them for casting out a divination spirit? Yes, it was, absolutely. Is that the right thing? Not necessarily. Once again, the voices of men concerned with money were more important than the lives and livelihood of women in the story. We do well to think very carefully, not only about the voices that are shouting, but remember what we talked about last week? What were the voices that are shouting too long? fear, hatred, greed, lies. Let's give love, let's raise up that fader on the volume of love a little bit and think about what are the untold, unheard stories. Who are the ones that are least paid attention to in society in general throughout history? Children. Children rarely get their due. Yes, as adults, we have greater wisdom by a life experience in a lot of areas. And we also forget what life is like when we were young. And if we are not willing to have that dialogue back and forth, we are silencing a necessary part of our society. I wish we could have known what that girl thought, what happened to her, what she felt, what it must have been like for her to be beholden to the Spirit. What would it have been like if instead of worrying about their meal ticket, these guys try to figure out ways to take care of her? What if, instead of it being just the argument of those who have the most power, all the voices are heard? Everyone gets to speak up. Everyone has to listen, to understand, not to respond, not to knee-jerk, but to have to sit with the stark, painful reality that throughout all of human life, a significant portion of people's lives, safety, and voices are silenced in the name of money, in the name of power, in the name of selfish ego. No one is innocent on that. My prayer, my hope, is that we remember the voices of the boys and girls. We remember that all the power structures in the world are things that are in place for good reason, have good purpose, have good value, and sometimes need to be examined. The whole point of our Constitution in the first place was to enable a society where we can make laws, we can change laws if they're not suiting us. And not everyone's going to agree on things, but we have to look deeply in ourselves and figure out, how do we make sure that we are listening to everyone's voices? The slavers, the magistrates, the townsfolk, Paul and Silas, and the slave girl. But if her voice is silent, violence ensues. It's hard when you look at stories like this and recognize that there are so many good things that are brought out of it, and there's so many things that could have been done differently that would make it a better story. So whatever facets of our lives where we're dealing with difficult situations, we're dealing with frustration, anger, hurt, fear, all of these things, are we making sure that we are listening to all the voices and making sure that the voice of love is the guidepost? The reason of love is the logic that we use to make sense of it all. So that all the brave men and women who died for this country may be honored, that we continue, not only in our spiritual lives, to love God, love our neighbor, and love ourselves, but in that, ensure that we protect liberty and justice for all, as our Declaration of Independence says, and respect the dignity of every human being, as our baptismal covenant says. May we be listening. May we be compassionate. May we be willing to hear criticism in any direction that it comes, and make sure that the law of love and God's mercy, compassion, justice, healing, and reconciliation are there to ensure that all God's children have the lives that God has given them. All God's children get the help they need when they are broken. That all God's children have the life where they can go into their lives and not be afraid for its loss. May love be the lens through which we look at all the aspects of our lives together in community. And may we listen carefully to the voices that we have too often ignored.